Hello, all, and welcome to, yes, it's a beer review, I suppose, but it's also more of a retrospective. Right now is the first beer review of the month of December. It's the 3rd of December, which means I go and crack open one of my very valuable Anchor special ales, their beloved holiday ale. This one is 2022 because that is the last special ale that was made. The 2023 one, they made the label and posted the label on social media, but then Sapporo shut down the company shortly thereafter. I don't know why my camera likes being super close up. I probably need to replace it. And I'm going to dub this particular review the I need to replace a lot of things review. So my battery died at Thanksgiving, my mom's Thanksgiving party. Car battery died at my mom's Thanksgiving party. And yeah, that made the next few days of getting to and from work special. And yeah, and it's not just that. So when I finally get somebody come down to my place, because to replace my battery, because I am completely and utterly inept at any car stuff whatsoever, they told me the starter's starting to go. And I don't think I'm being scammed or anything, because when you turn the key, the hood's up, it sounds like grinding metal. So yeah, a very happy holiday season for me, I suppose. But yeah, so this is my seventh bottle. I still have six bottles remaining. And I am hoping, to all hope, that somehow by the time I run out of my saved bottles of Anchor Special Ale, that I'll be able to have Anchor Special Ale yet once again. So I suppose I should give a brief update um, on where Anchor Brewing Company is right now. My previous update, which was in the summer, I mentioned that Anchor had been purchased by Humdy, what's his last name here? Humdy, okay, the guy who owns Chobani. Let's put it that way. Um, so the guy who built Chobani up from nothing, he's a Kurdish guy from Turkey. He went and purchased Anchor because he really liked the history and story of the company. And let's go back and show you this wonderful label again. I need to replace this camera. I just need to go and accept that this camera, which is literally something I got in about 2009, 2010, desperately needs to be replaced. Uh, yeah. But anyways, he purchased it and they're slowly working towards reopening it. And there's been some roadblocks along the way, neither of which has been completely resolved. First off, being the labor issues. Anchor was a unionized brewery, and while the new owner has accepted the fact that it is a union shop, there's still a lot of controversy over the fact that he hasn't really met and sat down with them yet to work out the details. And I think, I understand where both sides are kind of coming from. One side kind of wants to preserve the jobs as much as possible, while the other side is like, well, how are we going to reopen this? Because it seems that a lot of the problems Anchor had, and a lot of the problems many American brewers have, mid-tier brewers especially, was overexpansion over the past few years. That is now a lot of craft brewers just, collapsing after that over expansion, like Green Flash. Let's see here, what's another one? Well, I can't think of another. Oh, Ballast Point. Ballast Point is still around and apparently still being distributed in Hawaii, oddly enough, but it's now contract brewed as opposed to brewed in its own brewery. And so a lot of the a lot of these craft brewers have closed or greatly contracted their business. So it makes sense that Anchor's new owners would probably think, well, we should contract back to what our core business is. And really, that's serving the San Francisco, Northern California area, craft beers. And instead of trying to go and expand distribution and production as much as possible. And of course, that means you're not going to need as much workers as you would have when you're trying to expand as much as possible. Hopefully, some sort of compromise can be reached with that. I mentioned that in previous review, and I should probably open this up. It's been sitting on the counter for about 16, so we'll get to the next part of the news after we go and open this up and review it. So this particular beer, because it was odd beer that had not had its own full sixer, was one that ended up being stored on its side for a good period of time. And also lived through my unfortunate, disaster where my refrigerator died and was out for several days. So this poor beer has been through a lot. So you can't really see it right now, but there is some particulates floating in here that I can see. Coloration seems to have lightened a little bit. Light seems to be coming through, but I'm also using a different glass. I'm using, my usual taster rather than my stout glass, which is good because this poured out with quite a ferocious amount of head here. Ooh. Very malty now. Most of the hop presence has resided quite a bit. Subsided, I should say. Of course, because this is a 2-year-old beer. At 7.2 ABV, I can probably get by with aging this for maybe another 2 or 3 years before it starts getting overly weak. Well, we shall see. I haven't even put this in my mouth yet. But, there's still a nice sweet maltiness there. Herbaceousness, kind of a licorice-like note. Slightly woody cedar-like note. Somewhat closed up, but then, these older beers tend to be a little bit more delicate in their expression. So yeah, kind of woody, aromatic. All in all, still very pleasant smelling. Kind of losing those sort of floral hops and I think a measure of the earthiness as well. Okay, on to the palate now, shall we? I have to say it's held up somewhat well. There's still quite a bit of hop bitterness that emerges in the mids and into the finish. It's not as strong as before, but still very present. Bittersweet chocolate notes up front, as well as a nice resininess. Mouthfeel feels a little bit thinner and a bit more tannic as well. The mids have a carob-like note. The long finish is very much of hop bitterness and resininess. Again, somewhat tannic. Bit interesting that it's lost the sugars a bit. Or maybe, there wasn't that much sugars to begin with. There's a slight off note in the top note. That sort of age note, that unpleasant age note, kind of a very, very subtle, slight mustiness. Along with that cedar up in the top note. Honestly, yeah, it smells kind of like opening a wooden box that's been stored in the attic for a while. All in all, still pretty pleasant. Surprising thing that I'm noting is, one, how much hopping and hop dimensionality is left on the palate, even though it's not quite there in the aroma anymore. And two, how surprisingly dry it seems still. In fact, it seems drier than I remember it from the last couple times I've had it. And it's going to be interesting to see how this develops over time. I don't think it's going to particularly improve because it's not quite heavy and rich enough to, hold up, to really develop new nuance, to bloom with aging. It just changes with aging. But yeah, I'm pretty well impressed with something that's a 7.2 holding up this well after 2 years. Now, back to the second part of the news. So, while revamping the old brewery building in San Francisco, it was discovered that their wastewater system had been not properly, what's the word I'm looking for here? Purged and emptied by Sapporo before they cleaned out. It's almost as if when they shut down the brewery, they just closed the doors and did a minimum amount of cleanup. And so, because these things were left in the wastewater system, it apparently damaged the wastewater system, which apparently was also not on, not particularly in great shape to begin with, being one, old and connected to a very old sewerage system in San Francisco, being part of the older part of San Francisco. And as such, according to Reddit posts that I've read on, let's see here, the beer subreddit, just our beer, somebody who is one of the contractors working with Anchor stated that the new owners are seriously considering abandoning the old the old brew house, which would be quite sad because it's been there decades. I don't believe it is the original one from 127 years ago, but it's been one that's been in use for quite some time. And San Francisco being the kind of city it is, and I'm going to refrain from any political commentary at this point. Let's put it this way, any sort of new industrial building or endeavor is incredibly difficult to build due to the lack of land and the high amount of regulations that exist in San Francisco. So, you know, they're stuck with the fact that, well, we have a wastewater system that is broken to the point where it may cost more and will take more time since it also has to include the uh, municipal assets underneath the building itself to reopen the brewery versus the fact, well, where can we move to? Where can we move to? Because I don't think that Anchor is such a part of the entire history and iconography of San Francisco that I don't think it can be brewed outside of the city. That said, where in San Francisco is there any free space to go and brew anything, period, to build a brewery? Maybe a very small one, that doesn't have much production. But I think that even just the demand within the city of San Francisco itself would demand a fairly large building to be dedicated as a brewery. You know, uh, this isn't like your normal average craft beer. This is a craft beer that is, served at Giant Stadium. I don't think it's called Giant Stadium anymore. I think some corporate entity has bought it out and it's called something else. Um, Instead of, or was it Candlestick Park that was had his name changed? I can't recall. Well, it wants to be blurry. Let it be blurry. I'm just going to look at the beer until it doesn't want to be blurry anymore. So basically, they're faced with that hard decision, and you know, um, it's looking like they're aiming to have their first beers out sometime in the next year, 2025. I am hoping for that. Even if it means that it's just for like the San Francisco area or the Northern California area, and I'm not able to get it here in Hawaii. Um, I'm hoping for the best. So 2025 seems like the best right now, the best possible thing. Getting a beer out then. Just some nice Anchor steam, maybe. And yeah, until that time comes, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. As a channel note, I know I said I would be doing more videos. These car problems that have cropped up, as well as a mandatory work training that will eat up an entire week for me, means that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to do as many reviews in December as I had planned, but c'est la vie. And that, folks, is your for beer review and Anchor Brewing retrospective for this evening. Cheers.